Warning, this podcast may get you a job in audio description, but I cannot guarantee that in any way, shape, or form. It also may contain content that some listeners may find offensive and a bit of bad language. And, this show's rated R for...
Radiant?
Yes.
Rated R, only for pirates. Welcome to Seesaw Podcast
with your hosts, T, Cleves, and Selena.
Every week, bringing some much-needed balance and humour to brighten up what can sometimes be a dark, disabled world.
Welcome back to Seesaw Podcast, your one-stop shop for finding a job. Your results may vary. This time around, we have part dose of our fantastic chat with Eric and Dakota from IDC Digital. But before we jump into that, we are going to see how or what people have been up to. Cleves.
Eat and work and sleep.
Okay, let's ask someone who might give a shit. Selena, what have you had going on?
Do you know what? I've been watching The New Little Mermaid and I've been analysing the audio description.
I watched that. Som's audio description.
You what?
I watched it without audio description.
Oh.
Soms, it's French for without.
Okay,
It's used in an English language sometimes. Oh man, every day's a school day, isn't it?
It's interesting. I think they need to take some tips from IDC Digital.
Oh. Based on what we spoke about last week in terms of describing ethnicity and background and that sort of thing.
Not at all. Not at all. I got really confused because I didn't really realise why Ariel still had red hair. And I genuinely didn't know if I'd press play on the wrong Little Mermaid, if I'd put on the original cartoon or the live action. I didn't know. It took me a while to figure it out.
Does it in the description? I can't remember. Does it actually say that Ariel's black?
No, just says she has red hair, which what threw me a little bit. I was like, hang on.
Yeah, that's a bit of an oversight. One thing I will say, it's not an advantage having sight to the level I do while also using audio description. Because, much like The Lion King, stop having animals with lip flaps, please, Disney.
I don't see a problem with it.
It's creepy. I don't want to see Sebastian the crab moving his jaw as a real crab.
That sounds interesting, though. Wish I could see. But just for that.
Tony's used to looking at his crabs.
I do like Sebastian in The New Little Mermaid, though. Well played. Well acted.
Yes.
It was all well acted all round, to be fair.
Pretty solid.
Apart from maybe Eric. Eric kind of sucked. Prince Eric, that is. Not Eric from IDC or myself. A lot of Erics out there. Most of them are great, to be fair. I've never really found a bad Eric.
Apart from the Eric in this film.
Yeah, he just wasn't played very well. I blame the actor. The actual character, absolute lad, mate. Yeah, I didn't think this would get into mermaid chat.
No.
IDC?
Do you want a quick QBN, just in case we need the time?
Nah. We led you down the path, T.
Right. So this is part 2 of our great chat with Eric and Dakota from IDC Digital. If you haven't heard the first part, go back to that. This one is all about what you need to do to get into the business as well as how narration works. Have you had any issues with contracts and providers of contracts where you provided your services for them and they've come back saying, we're not happy with this? And because there are the two sides of the coins there, whether you felt that you have to double down on it and you think it's the right way of doing it, or sometimes you might have thought that, no, you're being ridiculous. And it doesn't have to necessarily be terminology. This could be in general. Are there any times where you've had to really go back and forth with a provider?
Most of those conversations are going to happen up front. Again, every company, for the most part, companies that are around that are established, that everybody knows their names, they have a style guide. They're all basically similar. There's weird, everybody has their own little weird things that you can and can't talk about or where they don't want to mention. There's one provider that doesn't want to mention cigarette smoking. There's another one that doesn't want to mention, again, there's still some that don't want to mention the race of characters. There's some that don't want to describe don't want to use anything more than PG language. Like, it's everything we already talked about. So those conversations are usually held up front and the expectations are understood. Now, there are clients that come to us that are not major studios. They're not a major streaming service. They're just an independent production company, and they come to us. And to their credit, most of those times we get a client that comes in and says, we don't know anything about audio description. They recognize that we are experts in the field, and they kind of defer to us. And then there's things they'll ask us, like the conversation we're having right now. I've had this conversation before. How do you guys handle race? How do you handle, body type? How do you handle sex? How do you handle this subject matter or that? And how do you pick a narrator? How do you, all this different conversations usually happen up front. And 9 times out of 10, through the conversation, they appreciate our expertise and they will defer to us to do the best job possible. So that kind of, again, it really eliminates that conversation on the back end, to your point, like, hey, what the hell why is this like this? What the hell you do this for? That, again, usually, and we'll ask questions like, if we have a question about a certain character, especially in today's times, you can't be too careful in terms of, you don't want to misgender people. You don't want to, misdescribe people, with wrong pronouns or things like that. You have to, if you have any question at all, just reach out and ask, like, hey, how do you want us to describe this person? What do you want? What approach do you want us to take? You're never going to get 100% right, but you try. So from that point now, when we deliver stuff, there might be a template. We might make a mistake. We're not perfect. If we mess something up in terms of misidentifying a character, in terms of like, calling them by the wrong name or something, that's happened. But like, we fixed it, we move on. But as far as like big conversations about what the hell were you thinking, that doesn't come up. There have been times where I've given my opinion to a client, hey, I think we should do it this way, or we've pushed back on the not wanting to describe race or sexuality or what have you, and the client just doubles down and says no. At the end of the day, the old cliche, the client is always right. Well, that's not always true, but the client is always signing the check and paying the bills. So you kind of have to give them what they want. But again, 95% of the time, clients these days, they recognize that they're coming to us. Again, there's plenty of cheaper companies you can work with than IDC, but you're coming to us because you want a really good product. And there's a handful of other companies at our level, same thing. So when you're coming in the door, you come to us for a reason, and it's because you expect quality. And so they tend not to meddle that much and just trust us to do our work. But there are it doesn't fall on Dakota. By the time it gets to him, I kind of tell him. I've had my writers come to me and be like, "Hey, this is not right. We should be doing it this way." And I'll say, Dakota will tell you, I'll say, "I agree with you, but just do it this way anyway," because it's out of our hands. Yeah. But yeah, that's basically it.
You touched on the company's sort of style guide, but also the narrator. My assumption on that would be that they have a sort of general idea of what they want the narration to be, but you get a final say on the voice actor of that. So firstly, when you're writing, do you have a voice actor in mind? Do you have like people on the payroll that you think this would be the best person to do this or to do that within that sort of limitations that the company has given you? Or is it a case that you don't really have an actor in mind at the time?
Usually how it starts is we get the project in and I assign it to one of the writers. Now, again, I'm lucky where all my writers are amazing. So I'll filter like a science fiction or a fantasy thing. Yeah, I'll probably have Dakota in mind for that. But if he's unavailable for any reason, then I can give it to anybody else. And I have no fear that they're not going to step up and do a great job at that. I'm very lucky that way. So they'll start on the project. And usually, like if it's a movie, halfway point, if it's a series, once we get an episode or 2 in, I will then have a conversation with the writer. I will call them and say, hey, what are we thinking voiceover wise? And really what I want to know there is it as simple as we're trying to contrast, it's a lot of women in the movie and we want to use a man and vice versa? Or much more importantly, are there any issues related to race in this movie that we need to be aware of? Is there any, are there any LGBTQ issues in this? Are there any, issues that, where this would be inappropriate for a man to be voicing this? Hey, is this a British show? Do I need a Brit on this? Is it Irish? Whatever the case. At IDC, we have, I think last year I used 55 or 56 different narrators across all of our projects. Included in those 55 narrators are 20 to 24 members of the blind and visually impaired community that we work with as narrators. And again, within that 55, not every, we're constantly adding to the roster because we always want to make sure that we're being culturally appropriate. So, it's a constantly, last week I cast a Japanese woman because, I have a Japanese man on the roster, but we needed a woman. So I went out and especially cast her for this particular project. And she'll do other things. She's not just limited to that. But we wanted to make sure that we had somebody appropriate for that one. So that's the conversation, because a lot of studios, again, we don't operate this way, but a lot of studios, they just have, like I said, a man and a woman, and it's usually a white man and a white woman, and they describe everything. And the studio just decides to go with a contrast, if we want a man or a woman. And that's just really, especially in today's day and age, it's falling short. It's really, there's no excuse for it. It's really, you just don't care at that point. If you're a studio right now making audio description and you don't have blind people on your payroll doing audio description, narration at least. I mean, we have blind people doing QC work with us. We have, like I said, like 20 plus people doing narration with us over the years. And we're actually trying to onboard one or two completely blind people to do audio mixing with us. So, if we can do it, and we're really a small company compared to some of these others. There's much, much bigger companies out there in the field than us, and they're not hiring any of these folks. And there's no good excuse beyond, the only real excuse you have is we don't give a shit. And that's not a great answer, but that's all you got really at this point. Because I have said, and anytime I do a podcast, and I've done a lot of these, I say the same thing. There's an article that just came out on LinkedIn last week that Liz Gutman wrote. And my quote in that is, there's nothing proprietary about accessible workflows. And I believe that. And I've offered this up every time I've done this. And to the credit, a couple of people have reached out to me, some of my competitors. I will get on a phone call and I will talk to you about how we work with blind people and our process and what we discovered in terms of what works and what doesn't. And I will help you get up to speed hiring blind people. That's the offer I make. I will make time for you. I will get on a call. I'll get on multiple calls. All you have to do is shoot me an email or shoot me a message on social media, and I will make time for you if you're the head of a studio to figure that out. Again, I've had a couple of people take me up on it, and it's worked, and they're working with folks, and that's great. And there's other people that are heads of major studios that are just ignoring that offer and ignoring that. So all of that plays in to casting and our approach to everything. But there's definitely a lot of conversation amongst that. Dakota, did I miss anything on that? I'm sorry. I think I cut you off in the beginning.
The only word that I would have added when you were talking about only having a man and a woman, particularly only a white man and a white woman on the cast, I would say that it does feel sort of a little reductionist. If you only have two options, there's bound to be, something that's left out.
How is it different working with a blind voice actor to one that's fully sighted?
The workflow is different. And again, when I jumped into doing this, Liz and I had a conversation right before the pandemic. We said, what do we want to do this year? And I remember her saying, I want to work with blind narrators. And I was like, okay, let's figure this out. And we were guilty at that point too, thinking that it was going to be too hard or it was impossible because they couldn't come to the booth. And, again, just we were guilty of a little short-sightedness as well. But we had committed to doing it. And then that's the one thing that the pandemic did was force everybody to work remotely. And then once that happened, and once everybody went remote, I was like, well, now we got no good excuse not to be working with blind people because everybody is doing it this way. So let's just figure out. So we talked to Thomas Reed, who's the host of a podcast called Read My Mind Radio in the States. Phenomenal. He's a blind man, and he again, his podcast is a lot what you guys are doing about audio description, and he's a phenomenal advocate in the field and everything else. So he was Liz and I were invited on his podcast, and I think we were probably just talking about his lack of opportunity and wanting to be involved. And we hung up the phone and I said, let's just do it. Let's do it with Thomas. And so I talked to him privately. And so we worked out a workflow with him that worked really well for him. It involved screen readers and specially formatted scripts and worked great. And then we onboarded another blind person, and they were like, I don't want to work with screen readers. I want to work with this way. And we were like, oh, okay. Again, we were kind of short-sighted where we thought one size was going to fit all. And then we worked with another one. And so now we have like 3 or 4 different. Some people want to use a Braille reader. Some people want to use screen reading technology. We have a couple people that can actually re-speak things as they're listening to them. So if we do a scratch track and give it to them, they can listen in real time, re-speak the AD in real time for the narration, which is a skill that I will never possess. It blows my mind. It's like superhero shit. I can't even get my head wrapped around it. But but they come from radio, so they're used to doing that, where they can, doing live spots on air and stuff. So again, so we have like 3 or 4 different workflows, but the general one is it's a little different. Whereas it's although we have done in session live records with blind folks, we've had people in the booth and we've done live recordings with them. So I'm not saying that doesn't happen, but that's not the majority. The majority is we specially format the script into whatever format they want. We send it to them, and then we coach them through Zoom or through a phone call and kind of tell them, and then they'll record the lines on their own and send them back to us, and then we kind of puzzle it together. So that's the workflow generally for that. But we have done live sessions as well. It's really up to the as long as the person has a professional sounding setup, which is a big part of it. I get a lot of people contact me and say, I want to do AD, I'm blind. And I say, okay, great. What kind of mic do you have? What kind of preamp do you have? What kind of headphones? How's your space treated, for soundproofing? And a lot of times that's the end of the conversation. And then I've had other folks say, help me get that sorted out. So we do. I've helped, again, I've onboarded and trained probably 15 to 25 different folks from the community at this point. And not, in all different levels. Some people came in really set up well. There's folks in the community that are been doing this for, we are not breaking ground. There are blind people out there that have been doing voiceover for audio description for decades. They're out there and they've been out there. But as a major studios, but mostly they've been working independently or for one particular company. So it's been heartening now to see some of our major descriptive video works. Reese Lloyd is the head over there. He has really, to his credit, really made the effort the last few years to really jump in and to onboard and train and utilize a lot of blind people and blind talent in different areas. So shout out to Reese for sure. And other studios are coming along slowly but surely. And then some are not moving at all. And that certainly needs to change, and they need to be held accountable for that, I think.
With regards to the actual recording, based on any voice actor, whether it be because it was the wrong casting choice or whether the sound setup was wrong, or simply because when they did the reading, it was just terrible and they fucked it up, has there been any points where you've had to redact part of what you've submitted or completely take everything back?
I've certainly onboarded people, given them stuff, and it's come in and it hasn't been right. Like Thomas, for example, the first project we did was a show called Skin Decision for Netflix. It's a reality show, plastic surgery, I think, or something. And, I gave him the script. I gave him the notes. I told him, Murray, this is what I want. He sent it to me and it was completely wrong. And I rejected it. I said, dude, this is no good. Do this over. And we had a conversation and he was all right, cool. Cause he wanted to make it right. So we've had that. There's a project coming up for Netflix that, again, I can't go too deep into it, but it's known that we're working on it. It's called All the Light We Cannot See. It's an adaptation of a novel, and that'll be coming out this fall. And we're working with a narrator by the name of Fern Lulham. So when we started working that with Fern, there was definitely the first episode, especially, we were working and she and I were having conversations about, hey, no, let's do it this way instead of that way. And so, yeah, some stuff came in and I said, no, let's try this again. And there was a dialogue back and forth. And to her credit, she was really wonderful about redoing it. Because again, we wanted to make it right. Now, as far as sighted narrators, I've had people call me and say, hey, I'm the best narrator and I can crush this work. And, I've got this list of credits and yada, yada, yada. And I bring them in and yeah, they just flame out. Like they just can't do the work. It's a skill like anything else, cold reading and your ability to work in this field. I've had people that go in the booth first time and it's like they're doing it for 20 years. And I've had people go in the booth that have a list of credits as long as my arm that, within one episode of an 8-episode series, I have to have a tough conversation with them and say, I'm sorry, we're going to have to go in a different direction with this. It's just not going to work out. And we've had some where, I screwed up. I cast somebody I thought was the right choice. And then I heard the track, not that they did anything wrong per se, but when the track's done, I go, I didn't get that one completely right. Now, to my defense, I've done 10,000 of these things. So, I'm not going to bat 1,000, but I've got it right a lot more than I've gotten it wrong in my career. But there's certainly been ones where I was like, yeah, that wasn't right. And frankly, I've had clients insist on, we want to use this person or that person. And I've said gently, I don't think that's the right decision. And they've insisted that we use a certain narrator, and the track I don't like. The writing's great because again, I have the best team in the world for the writing, and the mixing is fantastic, but the voice itself does not fit. And so sometimes I've taken heat like, hey, why'd you idiots cast that person or this voice? And I'm like, and I can't say, well, because the client wanted it. I just have to fall on the sword and go, sorry, our bad. We'll try to get it better the next time. So there's all those things that do happen. But, again, we have 50 different people in our rotation. And so at this point, most people that work with us have done more than a couple projects, So if you hear somebody on a track with us more than a couple times, that means they're pretty good and we like them. And they're pleasurable to work with. That's a big part of it too. They're not jerks and they do a really good job. And so we'll bring them back. Now, within that said, there's funny, like I have narrators who on social media, people will bitch about like, oh, I can't stand this narrator. Why are they using this person? And then somebody else will come out, a couple of days later and be like, oh, I'm so happy this person's voicing it. Same person. This is my favorite narrator. I'm so happy. So you take somebody to, I always say this, you take 10 people for ice cream, somebody's going to complain about it. You know what I mean? So you can't please everybody. So you just do the best job you can and you try to get it right more than you get it wrong is the best you can do. But you're never going to make everybody happy.
You mentioned that you're always looking for new talent. If you had any advice for any aspiring listener who may be visually impaired, may have another disability, if they're looking to get into this field, what's one piece of advice you would give them to get their foot in the door?
I guess I would say from the writing side, I would probably say expose yourself to as much audio description as you can and just sort of get a feel for what seems to work and what seems to not work and the habits of the other writers that are considered the better writers in the industry and talking with the community and just sort of figuring out what people like the most and what really doesn't suit the audience very well. And then obviously just practice, even if it's not something that you're getting paid to do. If it's something, maybe try a show or a movie that you really enjoy yourself, and therefore you can just sort of get some practice in while also enjoying a piece of media that you might otherwise watch anyway, and just get your feet wet and try some things. Maybe some of them won't work out, maybe some of them will. It's all part of a learning process.
Yeah, I'd say for writers, I would say curiosity helps. If you're a curious person, you like to learn about a lot of different things. That'll help you in a career in audio description, because you're not going to just to get to work on stuff you like. You have to be open-minded to a lot of different things. You're gonna be forced to work on stuff you never would watch for any other reason. I would just caution people generally, manage your expectations. There's a lot of, in terms of financial reward, because there's a lot of areas in this business where you can make a hell of a lot more money than audio description. Nobody's getting rich doing this. Now, I make a nice salary. I make a living. I'm not complaining. But, we have a lot of people come in and say they think this is going to be a great side hustle or something. And they wash out pretty quickly because it's not easy, at least not the way we do it. We have a standard. There's certainly ways to cash a lot of money quickly in this, but you're not doing good work. So if you want to do good work, that's something different. I've had a lot of writers come to us a lot over the years, and with literally 100 credits to their names, and they do one or two projects with us and they quit because, we hold them to a much higher standard than to what they're used to. One person quit, told me, your standards are too high. I quit. And now that person is one of the leading teachers in the field. So figure that out. So, as far as that goes, the writing, take a good course from a good professor. Liz Gutman and Colleen Connors, they teach audio description training retreats. Level 1, Liz teaches with Colleen. You're not going to get a better crash course. Now, again, it's not cheap. It's an investment. If you're serious about a career in audio description, it's definitely not inexpensive. I mean, you don't have to take out a loan or anything, but it's definitely a commitment of money. And take a good course from somebody like a Liz Gutman and a Colleen, and then you might see, might like it. It's everybody. So that's what I would say. Be reasonable in your expectations. Take a solid training from a really good professor, and then practice. As far as voiceover people, we touched a lot on what goes into that. You have to, again, have a professional setup. Anybody can read copy or somehow digest the script and repeat it. But you need to have, again, a professionally treated space in terms of soundproofing. You need a good microphone. You have to spend a fortune on it. We have a microphone. People ask me, what's a good microphone? Rode NT1A. That's the microphone. It's $199. I can't tell you how many of our voiceover people at IDC use it for their home setups. In studio, we use some obviously more professional, like higher priced professional mics. But the Rode NT1A for home recording, we've had tremendous success with it. It's $199. You need to get yourself a preamp. The Scarlett single preamp, I think it's $129. So there's your setup. You get a mic stand. Your mic, your preamp, you're looking at $350. So it's not a huge investment. Soundproof your space. You can build something. One of our VO people, Sri Gordon, who's done a lot of stuff with me, does a lot of work with us, probably the most work with us, does Squid Game and a ton of other things with me. She went to IKEA and bought like a wardrobe, like a portable freestanding wardrobe, and treated that and turned that into an audio booth for herself. So you can get creative. You don't have to spend, you don't have to spend money with carpenters to build out. You can figure it out. Or closets. There's a lot of closets in use out there for voiceover. So that's it. Make the minimum. If you're going to come to me and say, hey, I want to do work with you as a voiceover person, and I tell you, send me a demo, and it sounds like it was recorded on an iPhone in the middle of traffic, I'm not going to hire you. Like, it's a professional pursuit. Approach it professionally. Again, I'll work with you, especially if you're blind or low vision. I got a lot more patience for you, a lot more tolerance. I will work with you and help get you up to speed. But if you're a fully able person and you're just too lazy to take a couple steps to approach things professionally, I'm probably not going to spend much more than one conversation talking to you. Again, we are really well stocked at IDC. We have, again, 50 people in the rotation. If I tell you what, here's some advice. If you're a minority of some sort, put your photo on your webpage. A lot of people have taken their photos off their web pages because they want to be known only for their voice. Well, it's 2023. And advertisers and studios, diversity is a cool thing these days. So don't hide from the fact that you're diverse. Put it out there. Because if I'm looking for an African-American woman or an Asian woman for a part and I go on and your name is, I'm not going to assume what you are by your voice. I'd like to see your face. I'd like to be able to know. And my clients want to know, hey, is this being voiced appropriately? Is the person voicing this the proper choice? One of our competitors just did a track for somebody. It was a book about a young black girl's hair, and they turned it into a series, and they hired a white middle-aged woman to voice it. And that was an incredibly bad, lazy choice. And they've gotten a lot of blowback for that, and rightfully so. So I've heard stories where a narrator was brought in for a project. It might have been the same studio. I don't want to talk tales out of school. Different narrator, though. And the narrator, to her credit, was like, hey, I'm the wrong person for this. This should be a black woman voicing this. And the studio said, well, we don't have any black women on our roster. Well, Fix it. There's plenty of studios out there that don't have the diversity that IDC has. Get on them. Ren Leach is great at this. He's one of our blind narrators, and he's phenomenal. He did Cabinet of Curiosities last year for Netflix. He's got such an amazing voice. Ren just calls up companies and says, hey, you don't have any blind people working for you. You should change that. And I can help you change that. And many have said, he pesters them enough where they say, okay, great. So again, if you're a diverse narrator, call up these companies or email them and say, hey, I noticed you guys only use this white guy and this white woman. Are you interested in maybe using an Asian woman or a black woman or a gay woman or whatever the kind of person you are? Man too. I'm not saying it has to be women. If you see a company that is clearly not being diverse and you're a diverse person and you can offer some diversity, hit them up and say, hey, I'm here. What's your excuse for not working with me? Shame them. They deserve to be shamed. And that's the way things happen, especially in areas of disability, or minorities or things like that. Traditionally, it takes a lot of pressure, and you have to keep your boot on their neck, so to speak, and enforce them. Because if left alone, they're not gonna move because they're lazy. And to my point earlier, they generally don't give a shit. So that would be my advice. Be vigilant, be professional, and manage your expectations.
Incredible. I think we'll leave it there for now. But thank you both. It's been absolutely incredible to learn about audio description. I use it, Cleese uses it, Selena uses it, and to get that insight is frankly amazing because there's so much to it that I didn't really realize was a thing.
It's been really fascinating, listening to it. And I think, just talking for myself, but I'm sure a lot of the community as well, we're very guilty of just grumbling at the fact that audio description isn't on something and then just happy to see it on a program and not actually thinking about the quality. And it's great that you guys are thinking about the actual quality of audio description. So great work. And it's, you're setting the gold standard, and I appreciate it. It's an
excellent point, Selena. And that's, I say this all the time. It's not unusual because for 25 years or more, the blind community was made to feel grateful for, any scraps of audio description they were given. Like, there was so much that was undescribed that anytime it did pop up, they were just so happy that it was there. And I think those days are behind us. Like, don't just focus on quantity, because that's when really subpar providers get in the mix to just crank it out as fast as possible. And that's not what you want. So I tell blind people, I know for years you were expected to expect scraps and be happy with it, but now it's time to demand a seat at the table and be served a full meal and dessert and everything else that goes with it, because there's no excuse. The difference between the money being paid to us at IDC and the money being paid to the companies doing poor work is almost identical. So you have to ask yourself, well, what's going on then? And what's going on is that the companies are just cutting corners and doing as fast as possible. They're churning and burning it just to crank it out to maximize profits. And we don't do that. We focus on quality, and other companies too as well. So that's the other thing I would tell people. And the last thing, and I promise I'll shut up, is that a lot of times what the community does is they complain, rightfully so, when things are bad, right? When things are bad, people go online. That's what social media is for, is complaining, right? So they go on and they complain and complain. This track sucks. This voiceover sucks. This company does shit work. Okay, great. And that's the end of it. But what you want to start focusing on is saying, hey, this track's great. This company does good work. This voiceover guy, this sounds good. Because what clients see the complaints, but they don't always know where to take it to. They don't know, like, okay, they're not happy with this, but how do we make it better? So if you put both out there, hey, it's a company A, instead of hiring this provider, why don't you hire these other people? They do better work. Because again, the rates are about the same. So that's what I would encourage people. Complain, yes, but also give some shout outs once in a while. Start talking about stuff you enjoy. And I promise you the work will filter its way around to the companies that are doing it well, because the clients, it's the same money, and they'd rather be, not yelled at, but they don't always know where to take it.
Definitely. Thank you so much.
Thank you guys so much.
Thank you both.
Thank you for having
Thank all
us.
three of you.
Cut to black. Do you think that's good audio description, voiceover? Will I get a job with IDC Digital?
You need to get inside a cupboard, like they were talking about with that person. Buy yourself a closet.
How good was that chat with Eric and Dakota? Like, learned so much. Really interesting. So much more, like, we want to know. But I'm looking forward to doing a Seesaw Cinema.
Absolutely. And I haven't chosen a film yet.
No, but I want to do their one of All the Light We Can't See, or whatever it's called. I think it's out on the 3rd of November. I've looked it up and I want to do it on our show.
Okay.
Let's do it.
Sounds good. Beach, want to sign us off?
Awesome chat all around, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to Seesaw Podcast. Your feedback and comments mean a lot to us, so if you'd like to get in touch, you can do so in the following ways.
You can find us on Twitter at SeesawPod, Facebook, Instagram and YouTube at Seesaw Podcast. And you can also join us at seesawpodcast.com.
Remember to like, rate, review and share with a friend.
This podcast was recorded in front of a blind audience.
Cut to black.
And Selena can bring us back. Do you want to do that
That's
again?
what I'm saying. That was my bringing her back.
Okay, do you want to do it again? Because I was getting impatient with that huge gap there.
I was giving editing time.
Yeah, but he doesn't need 30 seconds gap, does he?
Just trying to help Cleves out. God.